I will mute myself, and T Michael, go ahead.
Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. And before I'd be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, I'm free at last, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Hey, good morning, y'all. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me. I'm sometimes up, I'm sometimes down, coming for to carry me home. Tell all my friends I'm a heavenly bound, coming for to carry me home. Well, now swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Well, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Well, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. One more time, let it shine, let it shine. Let it shine. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. What a delight. What a joy to have been invited to spend and share this morning, this day with you. To know that the divine has brought us together for a divine and perfect reason, for an exchange that hopefully will provide uplift, that will provide a sense of grounding, a sense of understanding, a greater connection. I start off with song because it is the great equalizer, music. As Chuck pointed out, song does something that almost no other art form can do. It can touch us in places and in ways we fail to understand or even can articulate. Music, song, it opens and heals the wound at the same time. One of our members today shared the loss of a loved one, of a parent. And I would imagine that during the course of that homegoing celebration, there was song that helped all those in attendance appreciate there's a wound and there's a balm, like that balm in Gilead. To her and her family, I once again extend my heartfelt condolences. And to all of you, I offered that trio, that medley of song, as a way to begin our conversation, our talk today. You see, the music that I shared, those songs are called Negro spirituals, not Black spirituals, not African American spirituals. They are a genre of music that were entitled Negro spirituals. That's something that I know that our PC culture has asked us to kind of reinvent, or just to readdress, or to respond, or to remember different ways of referring to people, places, and things. But the genre of music that I shared are called Negro spirituals. They're spirituals. The interesting thing about the spiritual is that it was the first form of nonviolent resistance. Think about it. It predates Gandhi and King. It was a means and a manner in which the singer, the enslaved African, was intending to create a means, a method, a possibility of opening up the hearts, the minds, the spirits of those who had enslaved them, but also a way to add comfort and community to those who were also enslaved. Those songs, like the period from 1954 in this country to about 1968, that we call the Civil Rights era, the spiritual was a way that others could learn what people that they were not familiar with, had no understanding, and in the period of slavery, those human beings were not considered human. They were considered less than human. But the song, the spiritual, helped guide people towards seeing the humanity. So I offered those songs as a way to start and open up the space. You see, that last one, This Little Light of Mine, is probably a song many of you probably learned in a place of worship or from a family member and may never have known that it was a spiritual, but it is. Where do you experience your light? Where does it emanate from? I think about the word I used earlier, enslaved Africans. Now today, Chuck asked me just to share, and I'm going to kind of go all over the map a little bit, so stay with me, church. Now, the enslaved African, I use that phrase because who among us in this space, in this platform that we're in, woke up this morning and said, I want to be a slave today? Sounds ridiculous, ludicrous, almost laughable. That too is the case of the enslaved African. The African on the continent, when going to and fro their daily lives and finding themselves captured, kidnapped, stolen, taken away from their continent, their family, their loved ones, all that they knew, they became enslaved. And to use the phrase enslaved Africans places the onus, the responsibility, and acknowledges that these people were enslaved by others. And who were those who enslaved them? The Portuguese, the Dutch, the Spanish, the British. So we want to remind ourselves, the Americans, we want to remind ourselves that slavery was a product of others imposing their power and privilege. Speaking of power and privilege, I have a privilege, the great privilege of being a person from a freedman town, a town settled by freed enslaved Africans. You see, as the case would be, when 1863 happened, and soon to be the 13th Amendment in 63 of January of 1863, that is, and then the 14th Amendment, equal protection under the law, that occurred in 1868, the enslaved African was considered able to live through the protections of the Constitution, air quotes. So former slaves did not have the opportunity to live next to former slave owners. So the case was that throughout Texas, Arkansas, Oklahoma, and other places around the country, and further west, out as far as California, freedmen towns settled by those who had been freed from slavery, popped up. And guess what, y'all? Hey, I'm a Rambo from Rambo, Texas. That's right. Don't hate. I know. Y'all want to have towns named after you too, but it's okay. We went through a lot to get that. But in all seriousness, I am from Rambo. It's located in East Texas, right near Marshall. No. Tyler. No. Bivens. Shreveport, Louisiana. You know where that is? It's up in that corner of Texas, way up there near Louisiana. That probably helped out some. Well, one of the things I can tell you that was really cool about having family in Rambo was the fact that being from a place named after your family and having roots before, I won't say before Alex Haley, but certainly roots that Alex Haley elevated and illustrated through his book and then the series that came on television in the 70s. I learned what I call black pearls of wisdom, Ramboisms. I think of my great uncle, Nadan, who lived to be 104. And when asked, Uncle Nadan, how did you do it? What, 104? What is your pearl of wisdom for us? And he would look kind of quizzically like, He'd say, boy, air is good. That was his little pearl of wisdom. And it's true. breathing, breath. The air is good, and the breath inside the breath is where spirit, where God, faith, hope, and light exists. That's where that breath is. That's why when meditative practices ask us to breathe, we're illuminating the God within us with each breath, because the breath inside the breath is where God lives. Now, some of the other pearls of wisdom were things like, if the mountain was smooth, you couldn't climb it. Think about that. That's true. If the mountain was smooth, you couldn't climb it. That's why it's intended if you're going to have a mountaintop moment like King or Gandhi or any number of people that you think of in your family or even for yourself. It happened because the mountain wasn't smooth. There were places where you could dig your heel in and grab your hand and clasp onto and shimmy up toward to get to that mountaintop moment where you could see over and maybe see Jordan, see the promised land. That's what the enslaved Africans were hoping for. My family would say things like, talk, don't cook rice. Now, I know that this is a church community, so I'm not going to say one of the other ones. So I'll leave that one alone. It came to my mind, but it's not a real naughty one, but it's just one that reminds me that sometimes even pearls of wisdom have a little bawdiness to them, if you will. I'll move forward. One of the things I wanted to ask you is if you would do this for me. I'd like to ask everyone here with us today to kindly close your eyes. And if you can see me, your eyes aren't closed. Okay, now. Now, if you would, please point north so your camera can see which direction you're pointing. Everyone just point north. Now, keep your fingers and your hands up, and now open your eyes and see if you can look at all the different images of where north is. Let you know that not near a one of us really knows where north is without a proper point of relation. You can put your hands down now. We need a point of reference. That's what a compass does. A point of reference. That's what song does. A point of reference. That's what church community, not religiosity, but spirituality does. It gives us a point of reference, a collective experience. Like for me, a map. That's one of the great blessings that I experienced growing up, was that even with all my trials and tribulations, and I've had many, I had a map. I had a map because I had a connection to family, community, and a sense of heritage, lineage, ancestral connection, a knowing that allowed me to get back on track. I'll talk more about that map later in our conversation this morning. But think about your life and think about the journeys that you've had and think about what your family of origin and what your DNA gave you as that map to get back on track. There's an African-American proverb that says, the rungs on the ladder to success are to plan purposefully, prepare prayerfully, proceed positively, and pursue persistently. A lot of alliteration there. Purposeful, prayerful, persistently, and positively. Think about those things. Prayer is so integral to the journey that we have. Taking a moment, and wherever you are on your journey, and however you embrace tatumasi, omniscience, or that celebration of the oneness. Some call it God, some call him or her Jehovah, some call any number of ways of referring. But we know that taking time out to connect and to absorb and to acknowledge that which is greater than us, that gratitude allows us the grace. Like I think about Chuck, and I'm not picking at you, picking on you, but Chuck had a few technological moments there. And what I love about this platform of Zoom is that we've learned through COVID grace. We've really learned something that many of us didn't exercise a lot of. We've recognized that we have to operate from a space of grace more and more. We have to extend it to others and to ourselves. And that's been hard work for many of us, myself included, to forgive and to let go and to turn over and to acknowledge my humanness, my humanity, to be humble, not to think less of myself, but to think of myself less. Humility, not to think less of myself, but to think of myself less, to be selfless. So the grace that we've received has been really remarkable. So prayer is so important. Positivity, I don't have to talk about that. I'll take up more time than I need to on something we all are familiar with. But being persistent and purpose-filled. I often tell people that I'm living at the intersection of purpose and intention. I have a great intention and then purpose. I remember the fear that I experienced living and experiencing homelessness and living with addiction and a host of other things. And I realized finally that my purpose exceeded my fear. And that's how I was able to reclaim my life. When we were talking about Ramboisms, I wanted to talk to you about my travels as a child moving down to Texas. Traveling there. My father was in the military. He went to graduate school at Wayne State in Detroit. And I remember we used to drive down to Texas. And along the way, I was so maybe 7, 8, I used to think this was the coolest thing in the world because we would stop along the way. Very few places, but like when we got to about just outside of Ohio and just into Kentucky, just barely across Covington in that area, we'd stop for gas. And then there were always 3 or 4 adults, my father, my mother, my uncle, or my aunt, and my grandfather. And they would take turns driving. And then we would stop on the side of the road. They'd throw out a blanket, we'd eat, and we'd celebrate. We'd play Frisbee. I just thought we were the greatest family. And this was the best fun you could ever have. It wasn't until I was a teen that I realized, because of my Blackness, because of my being a person of color, because of my being an African American, we couldn't stop. There were no places to eat along the road. That what I thought, and it's about perspective. Perspective is more real than truth. What you perceive is your truth. And my truth was that there was nothing better than those moments with family along the side of the road. So I realized at that point that I had to embrace a mindset that would give me this. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching down that freedom road. Ain't gonna let old Satan turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let old Satan turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching down that freedom road. I started realizing that I couldn't let anybody turn me around. Not injustice, not frustration, none of those things. There is this amazing, it's kind of like I don't know if it's a quote, but it's kind of a pearl, another one of those pearls of wisdom. To watch your thoughts because they become words. Watch your words because they become actions. Watch your actions because they become habits. Watch your habits because they become character. Watch your character, for it becomes your destiny. What are we watching? I think about my grandfather, Papa, my father's father. He was my paternal grandparent, and he was a principal I shared with you earlier. And I remember I was about 5, 6. I remember it vividly. We were walking because I just gotten into first grade or kindergarten, and we got to the corner of a major street as he would walk me to school, and I snatched my hand away from him because the light was green and there was a little sign that said walk. So I jumped out into the crosswalk, and just as I did, a car made a right turn and came careening into the pathway. And just before the car got to me, my grandfather snatched me up out of the crosswalk and looked at me sternly, pointing and wagging his finger, and said, "Boy, watch the cars, because the light never hit nobody." We have to watch, pay attention, not only to the signs, but what's around us. Alvin Toffler is a great futurist writer. He wrote, "The illiterate in the 21st century will not be those who cannot read or write. It will be those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn." Learn, unlearn, and relearn. What are we learning? What do we need to learn? What do we need to unlearn? And what do we need to relearn? Think about where you are at that intersection of purpose and intention. As I've gotten now in my 60s, I started to realize I know I may not be the oldest person on this call, but I've come to realize that as you get to a particular age, that age is not lost youth, but a new stage of opportunity and strength. I remember as a kid, I thought that age was a weakness, that I'd be getting feeble of mind and body. But when I look at myself differently today, I see opportunities I never would have had, and I see strengths I could never have imagined. I know that earlier today, I think her name was Megan. Megan mentioned that her daughters came to help her with her basement. And she said, "I could never have done it without them." That takes amazing courage to acknowledge and to be able to ask for what you need, or for loved ones to know what you need and be there for you and stand in the balance, in the gaps of your life, and fill that bridge that connects you to your greater yet to be. These opportunities of strength. One of my strengths is that I've been an educator for over 40 years now. And while I was in East and West Africa teaching, I have an organization called Arm in Africa that I'm affiliated with, but I was in West Africa on this occasion, and I learned a great proverb from a West African, Umbada, who said, "When an elder dies, a library is burning." Isn't that beautiful? When an elder dies, a library is burning. We must remember to tell our stories, everyone, and to listen to those whose volumes, whose pages are drenched in knowledge and learning and understanding that we cannot possibly fathom unless we are willing and able to be silent and listen. Those two words are pretty funny. I don't know if you ever were to write them down in front of you, you'd notice that silent and listen are spelled with the exact same letters. Isn't that some stuff? It's no accident that listen, Listen, and silent, Silent, are two words that are interlocked by their letters and are two parts of our consciousness that we have to embrace. I think people here who are on this platform with me will know this one. And that is that remember the days when we used to have to find places with our Thompson guide or our maps? Or someone would give you an address and you'd be listening to the rock station or on the radio and you're driving along and you have to turn down the music to see where you're going. Sometimes you have to turn down the volume of life to see. I realized that with my addiction. I found myself in the 80s rather, because of privilege. I gotten out of college. I had a great job and loads of money, and I abused and took for granted, and also had a lot of self-loathing because of the messages I had internalized, because of those perceptions that became my truths. And after years of using, the bottom fell out. I found myself without a home, on the streets, trying to figure my life out. And I placed a phone call to my father, who at the time was living in Boston. He gave me a one-way ticket to the land of 10,000 lakes and 10,000 treatment centers. And I arrived at Hazelden, where I gained my sobriety, and I remained and have remained here with my sense of purpose, sense of humor, and sobriety for over 33 winters. And that is something that I celebrate proudly. But when I came out of Hazelden, I found myself at Dorothy Day because my family had been and I were estranged, and they weren't interested in lending any assistance. They were like, "You got yourself in this hole, get out." And I went through Dorothy Day, Mary Hall, an efficiency across the street from Penumbra Theater, and found myself in a space where I learned how to step into an opportunity of asking for what I needed, and for people seeing what I needed and stepping in, like the conversation I was having with you earlier about Megan and her daughters. People who saw me and realized what I needed. Because, one of the things that people who experience homelessness encounter, and I can speak firsthand, is that people don't look at you. You begin to lose connection with your sense of humanity. People avert their gaze. They presume that you're an addict, or that you're less than. And one of the gifts that I received as I moved forward in my life was that people started to see me. I started to see myself differently, and I started to see what I can share with you from this quote by Reinhold Niebuhr. I don't know if anyone is familiar with Reinhold's work. He's a Protestant evangelist. He theologian, not an evangelist, a Protestant theologian. That's an interesting Protestant evangelist. That'd be an interesting combination. I have to find one of those. He wrote, "Nothing worth doing can be achieved in our lifetime. Therefore, we must be saved by hope." Nothing worth doing can be achieved in our lifetime. Therefore, we must be saved by hope. Nothing that is true or beautiful or good makes complete sense in any immediate context of history. Therefore, we must be saved by faith. Nothing that is true or beautiful or good makes complete sense in any immediate context of history. Therefore, we must be saved by faith. Nothing we do, however virtuous, can be accomplished alone. Therefore, we must be saved by love. Love. I loved deeply my great-great-grandmother. Yes, I had a great-great-grandmother. How about that one? And she used to say, "Heaven hope us." And we would laugh, and they would tell me how I would just giggle. I think I was 2.5, 3. But this is the story that my siblings share with me when they would ask her, "Why you always say heaven help us?" She said, "Baby, you got to have hope if your help is ever going to come." You got to have hope if your help is ever going to come. I think about my Aunt Mama. She was actually my grandfather's cousin. We call her Aunt Mama, AIN''T. She ain't your mama, but she acted like it. And she used to always tell us about life and about what we were doing. We'd ask her for permission to do things. And she'd say, "Baby, you know what potential means? It means you ain't doing nothing right now. Potential don't make groceries, don't pay bills, don't do nothing. If you ain't doing it right now, you ain't never going to do it." What she was saying to us was not that potential isn't a real thing, but that for people of color, for women, for marginalized and disenfranchised people, you have to do it now. Now is the time. As Dr. King said, now is the time to make this nation what it ought to be. We must build alliances not on ethnicity or gender, but on truth, as Alice Walker said. George Washington Carver told us that how far you go in life depends on being tender with the young, compassionate with the aged, sympathetic with the striving, tolerant of the weak and the strong, because someday in your life you will have been all of these. Yes, all of them. So I say to you, as John Edgar Wideman wrote in his book, Words of and I was doing so well until I tried to remember the name of his book. Oh, well, just in the recording, just edit this portion out. But the quote I do remember, the quote is, the process for me that's going to knit up the family, the culture, the collective culture, all of us, that we tell our stories, that we keep on telling them. We tell them in our own way, and they express our own values, and we keep telling them despite the chaos, despite the madness, and despite the pressure not to tell. We must speak up. Dr. King reminded us that we may not remember the words of our enemies, but we will remember the silence of our friends. Community, we cannot be silent. Sometimes, even in the hardest, most difficult of times, we have to make them hear you. Go out and tell our story, let it echo far and wide. Make them hear you, make them hear you, and tell them in our struggle how justice was denied. Make them hear you, make them hear you. Your sword can be your sermon, or the power of the pen. Teach every child to raise her voice, and then, my brother, then will justice be demanded by 10 million righteous men. Make them hear you. When they hear you, I'll be near you again. Make them hear you. Remember the light and the love within each of you guides you humbly, gracefully, and powerfully towards your greater yet to be. Thank you. Hey, Chuck, I got 12 seconds left.
Awesome. Well, we have a few minutes, and T. Michael has graciously said that we could have a conversation. If anybody has comments or questions, I thought that was awesome. Holly, thanks for first introducing Kelly and I to T. Michael at your book launch.
More than my pleasure. He's been such a thrill and help and joy in my life for many, many years, and it's a privilege.
Oh,
that's so great. Holly, your words are so great that you froze. That lets me know that I'm.
Yeah, there was a little bit of a. We lost the last couple of syllables of what you were saying.
You know, that's my unstable internet.
Yeah.
That I have to deal with, and you, T. Michael, and there was one, you were saying something really important when I lost it, and I went, come on, but thank goodness Chuck's recording it, so I can go back and hear the end of that sentence.
Yeah. Great, thank you.
Yeah.
You really, there are so many things that I took away from that I will go back and grab onto some of those touch points that I want to share, but probably the last one that struck me personally when you said, let them hear you. One of the things I've thought about recently, because it's been 3 years now since my book came out, which you helped me with, and with so much now, especially increasing in the last 3 years, so much open discussion about race, indigenous communities, justice, all these things. And any of you who've read my book, you know that I wrote about those things. I have 2 specific chapters that I had to fight to keep them in my book, because when I had a publisher, the editor didn't want them in there. He didn't think they were important. He didn't think they fit. And I fired him, basically, and ended up publishing the book on my own. But, am I frozen again? No, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It was important to me because the book is about all the things that are important to me. And it's not just nature, and it's not just conservation, it's also equity and appreciation. So anyway, I feel good about the fact that I wrote it, but I'm not a good salesperson. And I'm realizing now that if I don't get the book into people's hands, they won't hear me.
Yeah.
And the thing that really boggles my mind, no one in my family has read my book.
Yeah.
And
You
I
know,
don't know why, but
yeah, well, Holly, I want to say to you that it's very powerful that you can share your what you received from that song, and then also that you shared your book with so many in this community, and that it's out in a space where others can receive it, and that you've learned that it is so important to allow others to hear us and to hear our voices. And I think that it was really great to have so many people in your congregation who shared some in the chat. And what I wanted to just say, just to shift gears a little bit, Holly, I wanted to say to folks, if you had a thought or a question or a comment, feel free to put it in the chat. I think they can save the chat, and that's a great way to reach out, because sometimes it's not our comfort level to respond vocally in community when there's more than 2 or 3 present. And so if you have a shared thought or a question or a comment and thought that you'd like to put it in the chat, that might be a way to allow other voices. I see another friend, Linda, on the call there. My goodness, Linda, I haven't seen you in forever. It's good to see you. Were you raising your hand, Andrea? Yes.
Good morning. I wanted to say that your beautiful baritone echoes so much wisdom of the generations in your Go Spirituals and in your stories. One of the ways that I was brought back to God was the love of my grandparents that survived their death. And so it was just such a treat to hear you fully embrace your heritage and to bring us back to your version of God. Thank you.
Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you. I thank you. Yeah. The ancestors are very important.
One of the things. Oh, go ahead, Amy.
Oh, thanks, Chuck. T Mychael, I just wanted to thank you for focusing on hope. We talked about that, I think it was 2 weeks ago in this community, what gives people hope. And it wasn't your great-great-grandmother. I loved her saying, and just that thought, I hadn't really thought about that, about the future, and that it's, it's not in our hands, but we can have that kind of faith. And that was just a really good message, especially these days. It seems like we need that.
Amen. And a woman too.
Something that I had never thought of until you brought it up was you don't get to the top of the mountain if it's smooth. And so all of the encounters, obstacles those are all, to me, they're difficult, but they're learning experiences. And it makes makes me have more gratitude knowing some of those obstacles and climbing towards the top of the mountain. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Thank you. Those things are necessary. They're necessary parts of the journey, the hard times. It's kind of like what our culture's come to embrace trauma. There's a lot of trauma talk. And I was in a conversation on a chat platform like this, and I had to stop the room, the space, and say, we have spent 40 minutes of an hour session speaking of trauma. And I want others in this space to remember that we would not have trauma if we did not know joy. Can we end this call knowing joy? Speaking to joy, the paradoxical nature of life and language means that without one, we cannot have the other. So we have to look at the other end and might inform our experience within the space that we're currently in. So thank you for saying that so much. I really appreciate it, Marilyn, about the journey on the mountain.
And also, it's the struggles that end up making the best stories to tell. And one thing that struck for me when you were talking about opening up to grace, when things don't go right. It happened yesterday at the concert when Chastity Brown's vocal mic all of a sudden quit working. It just stopped working, and the sound techs had to come down and scramble and try to figure out if it was the cable or the mic and they were swapping things in and out, and there was this awkward silence for a minute or so, but then Chastity just started improvising on the piano. And it was really a beautiful, beautiful moment, you know.
And you can't beat those. I have a little small little anecdotals to that one. I got the great pleasure of singing the national anthem for President Obama when he came to Minnesota back many years back, and he was at the Target Center for thousands upon thousands of people. And it was really nerve-wracking.
Kelly and I were there.
Yeah, I don't know, Kelly, if you all remember this potentially, but they forgot to change the mics in the batteries in my handheld microphone.
Oh.
So here I am in front of the president singing, "Oh, say, see, don't lie, what's up, hey." And the grace was that the audience started singing with me. I don't know if you all remember that, Kelly
yes.
and Chuck, but the whole 10,000 or more people started singing the national anthem with me because they felt so bad for the poor black guy with the mic that had no batteries in it. You know, it was just like this grace thing that came up. My mother was just beside herself. She was mortified. I flew her in for this experience, and there I am. So so that grace thing is really important. Yeah, it really is. I don't want to keep belaboring any of my stories when I know that your hour of worship is such that it doesn't need to be totally dominated by me. So Chuck, I think it'd be great just to say thank you again to everyone.
Yeah, and thank you all. Oh, quick, Linda has a quick one.
I just wanted to say thanks for coming. It's really good to see T Mychael again. He spent a lot of years, maybe you're still showing up at the elementary school, working with kids, and it's really amazing to see the work he's done with kids and now showing up here. Just, you know, I don't see you now. You keep showing up in places and times when you always have a message that snaps me out of whatever kind of trauma I'm stewing in. So I'm so glad to see you.
Thank you, Linda. It's always so good to see you brought so much to the lives of the children that you worked with. And so it's great to know that we were able to lift up our young people by giving them that sense of hope we were talking about today. So thank you for that.
Say, before you go, I'm the treasurer and I need your address, and I just sent a chat that you can respond to.
Yeah, I'm actually doing it as we speak. And
oh, okay.
Yeah, but absolutely. And I will happily send it, and you may certainly put as many zeros as you like. That's perfectly fine.
Okay.
Now we're talking about it out loud with everybody. Okay, fine. No,
That's great. Thank you again. And if you do have a little piece of song you want to close us out with, that would be awesome.
Oh my goodness! It's more of me. Oh my goodness, not more. Okay, great. I'll be happy to. We were talking about hope, and I think it was so neat when Amy was talking about that. And there's a song that I'm so very fond of because, you know, we have to believe in what I want to ask everyone. Another little close your eyes thing. Would you kindly close your eyes again? And would you please take your finger and point to yourself? Well, now open your eyes and look at where your finger is. And for many of us, because of the platform we're in, sometimes you go here because you think you want the camera to see you, but many of us point to our heart space. And to reach for the stars is ambitious, to reach hearts is wise. And our heart is where that breath and that pulse and that rhythm is. And the hope that we were talking about and the faith starts with beliefs. Our beliefs inform our behavior, and our beliefs are at the core of all that there is. And so I say to you, if you believe deep in your heart, you know that no one can change the path that you must go. Believe what you feel and know you're right, because the time will come around when you say it's yours. Believe there's a reason to be. Believe that you can make time stand still and know from the moment you try. If you believe, then you'll be there. Believe in yourself right from the start. Believe in the magic inside your heart. Believe all these things, not because I told you to. If you believe in yourself, yes, Lord. If you believe in yourself, woo, if you believe in yourself like God believes in you. Believe, everyone. Have a beautiful day.